Last year, it was February or March of 2016, at the fifth day, I believe, of the Jian Ghomeshi trial. I was
Hmm.
called up by the Toronto Sun and I was asked to comment on the behaviors of the witnesses. Now, I was in the middle of actually doing a psychological assessment right at the time. I was able to give the client some paperwork that they had to do, so I banged out an article really quickly for this newspaper. And I was saying, I'm not speaking about these particular witnesses who we found end up being very lacking in credibility. So I say it wasn't about them, but I said, I just want people to understand because I've worked with so many people who I have no doubt they were assaulted, they were raped, horrible things happened to them. And I know that their behaviors were not in line with what you would expect. And so I just want to tell people that we cannot determine what happened to somebody during an alleged incident based on how they acted during the incident, immediately afterward, or sometime after that. So I wasn't applying it to these women in particular, but I was saying that gaps in memory, changing stories, not coming forward, all of that is common among true victims of abuse. And I had background information on Jian Ghomeshi. I can't say how and what. And it wasn't just about Ghomeshi himself. There were other details of the case that I have access to because of my position. I can't say what it was. But when I put all the pieces together, I was certain that Ghomeshi did do what he was accused of because I was hearing things from people who knew the story, who knew him and everything else like that. Then a few weeks ago on Twitter, some people were flooding me with information about backstories, about the witnesses, about how this whole story came forward and everything. And it was a real eye-opener to me because I started stepping back. And it's like in the movie where that person, like they're married to the psychopath, and then they realize, certainly they have this flashbacks of all these different things that the person did. Now it all makes sense. It just came to me. I realized, I went back in my mind of all these different stories that credible people had told me about Jian Ghomeshi and about things that had happened. And I realized when I listened to it, a lot of the things that were being told to me, no one was lying to me, but they were coloring their story, what they knew about Ghomeshi, with other details that they didn't know, that they had heard second or third hand. And it made them able to tell me these things in a very compelling manner, and they truly believed it. And so this was such a shock to me that I, as a self-professed critical thinker, I think I fell prey to a belief system that, and by the way, when I heard how the witnesses have conducted themselves, I have said this to my class many times, I still believed Ghomeshi may have done these things, but I said the judge made the right decision, and we cannot change laws just because maybe a witness might act in ways we don't expect. I feel terrible for them. I'm not minimizing it, I'm not denigrating any witnesses. But if a person is not able to provide any evidence, or if their stories contradict each other, or if there's signs of collusion, or lies are exposed,
Why?
actual outright
Yeah.
lies. People will lie about certain things, but these lies are, they look like malicious lies, right? Manipulative lies, very different. We can't change a system to accommodate all of that because then we're going to find very many people guilty and anybody can just have their life's careers ruined, go to
Yeah.
jail, whatever. There's no easy answer, but I just want to say I had that come to Jesus moment with the Jian Ghomeshi trial, and I wanted to ask you your thoughts on how everything went down.
I don't know if I have any insights really about it because although I did make a video about it, I think I've now forgotten everything I said in it. It was a while ago, but I was influenced by the work of Diana Davison. She's so good the way she goes through, the transcripts, and her friend John, they both did a lot of work on the Ghomeshi accusations, the accusers, all of the discrepancies in their claims, the outright lies, all that sort of thing. And yeah, I think you make a really good point that we do need to recognize that sometimes the trauma of a sexual assault can have an impact on the victim's ability to explain what happened in a fully credible way. What worried me especially about the Ghomeshi was the willingness of so many of those who became activists around that story to make exactly the point that you're arguing against, that we do need to change the law so that we can widen the net, so that in all sorts of ways, an accused man's ability to mount a defense is limited, so that it's more likely he will be convicted. I found that appalling and just terrifying, really. And I think only someone who believes that women and men deserve to be treated fundamentally differently on the basis of sex, that women are somehow pure and more innocent, and that men deserve harsh punishment. I mean, we already have a legal system, a criminal justice system that treats men differently. There's a study by, I'm sure you know it, Sonia Starr, I think her name is, for the University of Michigan.
Yes, I know there's.
Yeah, she's looked at, men are more likely to be charged. They're more likely to be convicted. They're far less likely to offer plea deal, longer sentences for the same crimes. I mean, all those kinds of things. That's staggering. And to think that we would want to change the system to make it even more harshly punitive in cases of sexual assault. We already have changed our legal system so that certain aspects of the accuser's past are shielded. They can't be used, or it's very difficult for the defendant to use aspects of the complainant's past, to mount his defense and all that sort of thing. We're already making it more difficult for an accused to defend himself. And it seems as if there's really a lack of imagination on the part of certain activists, victims' rights activists. They don't seem to realize that to take all the power of the state and to use that power to ruin a person's life permanently, to deprive them of their liberty, to destroy their reputation, to ruin their lives. They just don't seem to actually be able to recognize the humanity of those people whose lives they want to destroy. And I find it really disturbing. The thing about the Ghomeshi trial and all the discussion around it that struck me, I think, was that I thought when it started to come out, all of the unraveling of the three accusers' stories, I thought that maybe this would be a watershed moment for feminism, when feminists would start to have a real conversation about what it means to be a sexually liberated woman. Because here we had these sexually liberated women who, had sex with, various men, and, you wouldn't judge them about it, and they didn't want to be judged, and some of them were into kinky sex, it sounded like, and casual sex, whatever it happened to be. So these were modern women in every sense of the term, who it turned out had participated in various kinds of sexual activities with a man, and then went on to write him love letters afterwards, to send him flowers, to do all these various things. And then they wanted to claim that all of those behaviors afterwards, writing, I love your hands, and all these various things. I can't remember all the details, but it was startling. Sending him pictures of them in bikinis, and all these various things. And then we're supposed to believe that all of that was the behavior of victims of trauma, that all of these were just their method of dealing with the terror of what he had done to them. To me, it just doesn't make sense. It suggests that there is a fundamental contradiction at the heart of the feminist version of modern sexually liberated womanhood. And it would seem to me, if feminists were honest about what feminists have advocated for, they would have to confront the fact that there is a contradiction, because feminists have told us for so many decades that there's fundamentally no difference between men and women's attitude towards sex and sexuality, and that women need to be liberated into sexuality. They can be just as randy as men. They shouldn't be judged. We shouldn't do slut shaming, all of these kinds of things. And yet at the same time, we're supposed to believe that women cannot speak honestly to men in the moment about what they like and what they don't like, and that even after the fact, after a supposed, traumatic sexual assault, they can't be honest with the man about what has occurred, or even they can't even be honest with themselves about what has occurred, sometimes supposedly for years and years and years, until they finally realize what happened and then can come forward. It seems that is getting at some kind of deep dishonesty in feminism that needs to be confronted. And yet I don't hear any honest discussions about it at all. And in fact, what happened after the Ghomeshi trial was just a doubling down of the feminist narrative. We heard more and more about predatory men and, women supposedly unable to speak about their experiences, and we heard about the trauma of women not being believed when they came forward. And so I guess that is what I find most disturbing about what happened around Ghomeshi and what is now happening, even more now, is that it seems that there is a kind of hysteria that's going on. You would know way more about this, of course, because of your expertise in psychology. I don't have that expertise, but Diana Davison herself said at one point that it's so bizarre that we now have a situation in which we have newspapers and other media reporting a story, and then another woman will come forward with the same story. This gets back finally to what you said, and soon you have dozens of women in some cases, or certainly a handful, all telling the same story, which is supposed to be proof that it must be true. But it's not at all surprising. I mean, it doesn't take somebody with a PhD in psychology to figure out that, if a story is published, it's not going to be very hard for some other woman to tell a similar story, and maybe even to start to believe her own story and to embellish it, as you said, with accounts that have been heard and validated by others. Not that I'm an expert, but I think it's a typical aspect of hysterical accusations, is that the power of suggestion can be quite compelling in those cases, so that people actually may come to believe that they've experienced something that they haven't actually experienced, but that it's been suggested to them by the accounts of others. And so it totally makes sense that you could have hundreds of women coming forward telling the exact same story or a similar story about a particular man. That doesn't make it true. In fact, that maybe should make us more likely to doubt it, or at least to begin to wonder about the wisdom of allowing these stories to circulate in the way that they do, and then be surprised when more and more stories start to be generated out of those that are circulating. It seems to be a classic example of how hysteria operates.
Right. Now, because we're running out of time, I just want to throw a few things to add to that and then wrap it up. So first, I have worked again with so many people who have been traumatized, and there are cases, I can tell you for a fact, there are some cases where women do act in some of the ways that some of these women did when they have been in a trauma, whether it's sexual or something else. We desperately try to make sense of our situation. And so I have seen these accounts secondhand, working with people where they did do some things that were so counterintuitive. And I say, even I, with my knowledge of this person and their story and of human psychology, even I sometimes I have a hard time wrapping my head around it. Can this really happen? But I do know that we aren't rational beings. And again, so I want people to understand that this does happen. I don't want people to start disbelieving everybody just because their accounts don't seem that credible or they acted in a strange way.
And what I would want to say too to you is that, I don't want to come across as somebody who, disbelieves everybody or is completely cynical in my attitude towards other women. But I think it does, it gets at the fact that what feminists have never really acknowledged, I think, is that sexuality itself is a realm of potential danger. Even normal sexuality, which of course encompasses a very wide range of behaviors. There is no normal sexuality, right? Sexuality is wild. And it's a very conservative kind of view, and that's why societies throughout history had all of these rules and all of these cultural norms and standards to try to control this very, very dangerous force. And so kind of what feminism was about, women, let's liberate women into being just as sexual as men because they should be, and this will be good. But actually, it seems that the experience of many of the women who are coming forward now, to put aside the specific accusers in the Ghomeshi case, many of the women that are coming forward now have had experiences that they have experienced as traumatic, but that, I think to most ordinary people looking at them are not particularly traumatic. One can empathize with their sense of trauma, right, without agreeing that what was done to them was criminal.
Right. So as the son of the woman who opened up Canada's first sex store, I'm all for sexual liberation. And the fact is, as you're saying, if we are going to go that route, we have to be honest about the potential impacts. We can't just blindly go and pretend. And I think we are seeing some of these repercussions. And people are going to say, you're just puritanical, you're old-fashioned, whatever. And no, I'm all for women's sexual liberation if we acknowledge what it might do for certain people. And not just women, but men and everybody else. So we have to be honest about number one. Number two, what really worries me is the narrative that's being formed now. And I want people to look up, it'll be all in the description, a few things. Number one, Title IX, where women even admitted that they initiated it. And their narrative, nothing in it says that this guy took advantage or whatever else, but later on, because they regret it or because someone told them, and they have the power in the universities to charge a male, and even if he's found innocent, in the end, his name is thrown out all over campus. There's some students who had to, they were suspended. They lost their term. They lost their year. The trauma of being falsely accused, all of this. And there was some woman, I forgot her name, she's known in the States, where she said something along the lines of, I'm paraphrasing, if we have to ruin the lives of a few good men in order to catch the bad ones, I'm okay with that. I'm sure you're okay with that. You're not the one whose life is ruined.
Yeah.
So we have to be so careful, and I understand the sentiment behind everything that you and I are talking about, helping people come forward if something bad has happened, helping them feel that they will get justice, helping them feel that they can be safe. But the means by which we're going about it are counterproductive, and I am terrified. In my sex classes, I'm trying to remediate all this, that people are thinking, well, I had 2 drinks, so maybe it was sexual assault. And even though I was totally happy and fine, I was completely coherent and everything, and that's scaring me because we are bringing a lot of fear, anxiety, confusion, distaste, everything to what could be a very beautiful, wonderful act, sex. So there's more harm being done than good with this type of narrative, and it affects everybody because everyone's so anxious about how are their behaviors going to be misinterpreted, and are there some horrible men who are predators, who are psychopaths, who are, who have no sense of compassion or empathy or whatever, and they are going to harm women? Yes, there are. There are women like that as well. Maybe a smaller number, but there are people like that. But we can't assume that because those monsters exist, that everybody should be poked with the same pitchfork.
It's a terrible thing that's happening now. Yeah, especially at universities, as you say, it's outrageous.
And again, Christina Hoff Sommers, she really talks a lot about this as well, and she shows the numbers and the stats, and I think people should look at, I'll put her link in my description, but the 2 stories I want people to look up, I lecture about them in my class as well. One of them is the judge Robin Camp. He's the one who said, can't you keep your knees together? And I don't know if it was Diana Davis or somebody that I found through her link. They showed the transcript, and they showed that Robin Camp, he might have handled it poorly, some of the stuff that he said, and he kept calling the victim the accused. That shows something going on there. He kept calling her the accused, so there may be some bias there. But if you actually look at the transcript, you can understand why he asked about her knees. There's more to the story. And I want people to look into that. Even the facts surrounding the case, and that there were witnesses before and everything, that's one thing. And the second one in Toronto, that just happened last week, Mandy Gray and a York University student, both grad students at York University, and the judge just threw out all pretense of justice, and he went with a very feminist narrative, and luckily the case was overturned. And now that the man, the supposed, I don't know what really happened, but looking at the details, and I'll put that link there as well, he had to sign a peace bond, and people go, aha, there's a peace bond that shows he's guilty. No, that shows he doesn't want to have to go through the trauma, the cost, and everything of another trial. If that's what it takes to sign a peace bond to move forward from this horrific injustice, then of course he's going to do it. But people see, peace bond, there's smoke there, there's obviously fire. So I'm going to put the links there, and these are just a few cases, and people are going to say, well, is it just a couple of anomalies? No, these are just the ones that are most recent that I can think of. Anyway, I do have to get to my patient.
Great to speak to you, Oren. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I look forward to having more discussions if you're okay with that.
Okay, all right. Thank you.